After taking a quick look at the new 2022 Indian Super Chief Limited in a recent video, I started to wonder how the Super Chief Limited might compare to its direct competitor, the Harley-Davidson Heritage Classic. I figure that if you're in the market for a Super Chief Limited, you're probably going to cross-shop it with Harley's Heritage Classic, as both are intended for similar roles. So today I'm going to compare their ergonomics, styling, features, specs and pricing. I want to see if one stands out over the other, and in particular I'm curious to see how the 116 Thunderstroke engine compares to Harley's Milwaukee 8 114 for torque and horsepower, and which bike is potentially best for comfort and wind protection. After all, these bikes are intended for touring and longer days in the saddle. Let's start with the visuals. When it comes to styling, there's no denying both bikes are lookers. But where the Heritage Classic builds on Harley's traditional iconic styling, the new Super Chief Limited deviates from what we've typically come to expect from modern-day Indians. Taking styling cues in a new direction, the new Chief draws inspiration from the very early days of Indian motorcycles, in particular the original Indian Chiefs dating way back to 1922. Hence the 100-year anniversary 2022 model year identification. Now, where the Heritage Classic has a more classical styling aesthetic, the Super Chief Limited appears more rudimentary in appearance. It really looks like a back-to-basics motorcycle, stripped down of all the bells and whistles. I'm a big fan of that open gooseneck frame tightly wrapped around that beefy chunk of a chromed-out 116 engine, kicked-out windscreen, simple Indian script logo on that beautifully sculpted tank, blacked-out rims on wire-spoke wheels, blacked-out forks, chrome exhaust, bobbed fenders, long stance and leather saddlebags. A really nice mix of black and chrome for me. Now, for the Harley-Davidson Heritage Classic, looking at the Heritage in black and chrome, to me that is one classically beautiful bike. When I see it in a side view like this, I'm reminded of all the Harleys that have come before. The designers have wonderfully captured the essence of pure Harley-Davidson with this bike, and I really appreciate Harley now offering more models in either blacked out or chrome versions. Although you can buy this bike in either a chrome or blacked out option, the chrome version only comes with a 107 engine, whereas the blacked out version rocks the new 114 engine. Other notable features of the Heritage Classic are wire spoke wheels on either chrome or blacked out rims, depending which model you buy. The Heritage also looks to have higher handlebar stock and passing lamps fitted as standard, and where the Chief proudly displays twin rear shocks, the Heritage has a single rear shock tucked neatly out of view, giving the impression of a rigid frame. In comparison to the Super Chief Limited, the Heritage Classic has a more refined and, dare I say, more finished feel. I'm not saying the new Chief looks unfinished or substandard. I'm just now noticing the striking difference in direction both brands are taking in this category of motorcycle. Where the Heritage Classic has a more polished feel, the Super Chief Limited has a more raw, back-to-basics aesthetic. In the case of these two bikes, to say Indian are copying Harley would be a mistake. When it comes to visual appeal, both get a 10 out of 10 for me. Though on the ergonomics side, the Harley Heritage Classic looks like it has a more comfortable, compact rider triangle than the Super Chief, and its windshield angled in line with the forks and closer to the rider could offer more protection from the elements. Now let's compare the rider triangle of both bikes to see if that's the case. Let's see how shorter, average height and taller riders fit on both these models. Now let's compare the specs. First up, engine capacity and power. The Super Chief Limited comes with the Thunderstroke 116 cubic engine. A 111 engine is available on the standard Super Chief in the US, but as we're covering the Super Chief Limited, we'll run with the 116 for this comparison. The Heritage Classic also comes with either a 107 or 114 cubic inch Milwaukee 8 engine, but for the sake of this comparison, we'll use the 114. I wish I could share horsepower figures for both bikes, but Harley and Indian aren't sharing official figures nowadays, so rather than guess, we'll go straight to torque. The Super Chief Limited 116 produces 120 foot-pound at 2,900 RPM, and the Heritage Classic 114 produces 119 foot-pound at 3,000 RPM. Very similar numbers here, practically identical. Wet weight for each bike fully fueled and ready to ride, the Super Chief Limited weighs in at 739 pounds and the Heritage Classic tips the scale at 728 pounds. Surprisingly, a little lighter than the Super Chief Limited. Now that we have the torque and weight figures, let's do a torque to weight ratio calculation and include a 200 pound rider. The torque to weight figure for the Super Chief Limited is 0.128. And the torque to weight figure for the Heritage Classic, when including a rider, is an identical 0.128. When it comes to bottom end pull, both these bikes should feel identical. Now let's check lean angles. The Super Chief Limited has a lean angle of 28.5 degrees on both sides, and the Heritage Classic measures 28.5 degrees on the left and a reduced 27.3 degrees on the right. Slight win to the Chief here. Ground clearance sees the Super Chief Limited having 4.9 inches of clearance, and the Heritage Classic clears the ground with 4.7 inches of clearance. Now to overall length. The Super Chief Limited measures 90 inches in length, and the Heritage Classic comes in a little longer at 95.1 inches. The overall width of the Chief Limited is 42.5 inches. Unfortunately, Harley is not listing an official overall width figure for the Heritage Classic, nor do they list suspension travel for that matter, which is disappointing. For reference, the Super Chief Limited has 5.2 inches of suspension travel on the front and 3 inches on the rear. Now let's look at tank sizes. The Super Chief Limited has a 4 US gallon fuel tank, and the Heritage Classic has a larger 5 US gallon fuel tank. Looking at the economy figures, we see the Super Chief Limited returns an estimated 44 miles per gallon, and the Heritage Classic returns a quoted 47 miles per gallon. Calculating the estimated range to empty, we find the Super Chief Limited should travel 176 miles to empty, and the Heritage Classic should travel 235 miles to empty. Having considerably more fuel range would be a selling point for me. Now for pricing. The Super Chief Limited 116 starts at $20,999 US and $29,995 Australian dollars. And the Heritage Classic 114 starts at $20,449 US and $33,995 Australian dollars. The Harley pricing is for the Vivid Black option with the 114 engine. Although the prices are very similar in the US, there's a big saving to be had by purchasing the Super Chief Limited over the Heritage Classic 114 in Australia. A saving of 4,000 Australian dollars. That's interesting. Well, as you can see, these bikes are pretty well matched, and really your purchasing decision will come down to which one you feel looks better and which is more comfortable for your body shape. Although the pricing difference in Australia could tip the scales for some. At the end of the day, I'm sure you'll agree the Super Chief Limited and Heritage Classic are two very appealing motorcycles, especially if you're planning some cross-country touring. That wraps it up for this one. Thanks heaps for watching today everyone, and hopefully I'll see all of you again in the next one. Bye for now.